Welcome to Anther Dish, the show about food, culture, and identity. I'm your host, Sarah Dugnan. Eating is so central to our ways of connecting as people and as communities, but how we show up and make space around food is a practice of care and art. My guests today, Trudy Crane and Chloé Crane-Leroux, are a mother-daughter duo best known for their individual food, fashion, and lifestyle content. Montreal natives, these two are bursting with creativity and a deep appreciation for romanticizing the little moments in life. They're here today to talk about their stunning new cookbook, The Artful Way to Plant-Based Cooking, which is a collection of recipes inspired by their European travels and the lessons around fresh local ingredients that they learned while shaping them into delicious plant-based meals. We speak today about how they are able to pull inspiration from the beauty of the world around them, architecture, landscapes, a moment of making pancakes together, and turning it into an artful experience of the table through their photography, ceramic making, and recipe crafting. Here's my conversation with Chloé and Trudy. All right, welcome to the show, Trudy and Chloé. How are you doing today?
Good.
Good.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great.
Thank you so much for being here. I was looking through your cookbook, and it is truly just the most stunning, beautiful visual cookbook I've ever seen. My jaw dropped
Wow.
when I saw it. So
Oh,
Thank
so
you.
nice. Thank you.
before we kind of jump into the conversation around your book today, do you mind sharing with listeners a snapshot of who you are, where you're coming in from today, and the type of work that you do?
So I'm Chloé Crane-Leroux, and I wear many hats. I always say I'm a photographer, recipe developer, and creative director, as well as a visual storyteller. And I am currently based in New York City.
My name is Trudy Crane, and I am a ceramic artist, a model, and an author of a second book. And
That's
I am based near Montreal in a small town called Gore in the country, which I just moved to, and it's absolutely lovely.
Awesome. Congratulations on your move. That sounds really fun.
Thank you.
So I think something that is exciting to me in terms of interviewing you both is that you're a mother-daughter team. And typically when I ask questions about, the foods that people grew up with, I'm asking someone to speak to their relationship with their parent. But in this case, we get to chat with both of you. And I'm curious if you can, I'll start with you, Trudy, if you can describe the types of food culture that shaped your relationship with food, and then we'll go to Chloe from there as well.
Well, I didn't really. I grew up in the west of Canada in Kelowna, British Columbia. And honestly, I didn't really have a food culture. I really didn't, we're not, food wasn't the centerpiece of our life. We really didn't. We did Thanksgiving and Christmas, but I don't have a lot of memory around food or, I remember my mom making cinnamon buns. I think that was sort of, to me, the most exciting thing about food in my growing up years. But I moved to Montreal when I was 26 years old, and I started to make friends, and I realized the culture around food in Montreal and Quebec just it touched me so much. Really very clearly remember being around the table with some new friends, and we stayed at the table for hours and drinking wine and one course after the other, and I thought, oh, this is for me. This is what I want. This is what I'm missing. I loved it. I loved the idea of people being in the kitchen and cooking together, and the celebration around the table just was so surprising to me. And I liked it so much. And Chloe's father is French Canadian, and so we sort of started this in our own lives. And I really wanted that to be Chloe's life too, to enjoy being around the table, to have this this wonderful part of her life to really sit and enjoy our food and set the table, and that's what we did. We made sure that we ate dinner together every night, that we had those discussions. I had a big job, so very often I came late, but Chloe was we still ate with her, even if it was 8 o'clock, and we still had our sit down. And so we really made food really a kind of central piece of our life. And we hosted a lot. And so there was always people and food and party and happiness kind of around. So that really, really changed me and really helped define for Chloe what that food culture is.
For me, I with so much love for food. It's funny because I think as a child, I was actually quite picky with what I was eating. Even though we really were traveling all the time, we were trying different foods. All foods were welcomed when I was growing up. We didn't have any particular lifestyle or diet. So I kind of ate everything, but I was very picky because I actually never liked meat and I never liked fish. So every time we would have meat or fish at home, I would literally push it to the side of my plate. And I did that until I was probably like 17 years old, honestly. I was just never really into that. And it's funny because even my mom was always saying, like, when you move out, like, I'm sure you're gonna become a vegetarian. And literally, like, clockwork, like, the moment I moved out of the house, I became a vegetarian. And it's so easy for me because, yeah, it was never something that I enjoyed. And then that made me transition to a vegan diet pretty quickly as well. But the aspect of food was such a big part of my growing up, even though I had this picky eating because we traveled a lot and I would constantly be able to try all these foods from different cultures. And it was so special to me. And I think that regardless of how picky I was of not eating meat, I really, really loved local dishes and I love vegetables and I love trying new flavors. So I think that that was so special for me, but also the fact that we combined food with how you said, Mom, like hosting and entertaining. That was such an incredible part of my life and of my growing up. And that made it even more special because every celebration was like gathering at a table. And I thought that that was such an incredible thing to do, honestly. And I really, really loved it. And I think that that is what I do today as well. You know, I entertain all the time, I host all the time. So it's definitely stems from something that, you know, I grew up doing. So it's truly one of my favorite things.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Thank you for sharing that because I also have a young daughter and we have a very close relationship that's like very much centered around coming together in the kitchen, you know, at the end of the day. And so I think your dynamic, the two of you really works and resonates in that particular way. And I'm curious, you know, Trudy, you spoke a little earlier about like setting the table, and that's a huge theme across your book. So between the two of you, I know you have very wonderful creative projects. Do you mind speaking a little bit to how both of you would set a table in terms of what's considered in the presentation of it from both of you?
Well, I think, as I said, we, you know, when we would have our suppers every evening at home, we would very often, I mean, we always set the table, very often have a candle lit, flowers on the table. It was, you know, I think for both Chloe and I, you know, having some kind of presentation in front of you, I think it's really about being quite intentional towards, you know, what we were doing. So, you know, enjoying the food, looking at the plate, um, you know, having this sort of ambiance around the table. And this, you know, we both recognize this as an important part of whatever every night eating or entertaining or, and as you know, I stopped being in marketing as a marketing executive. For me, it was sort of a natural part of my progression to. I had done ceramics my whole life, and so you know, having the importance of food and the table in mind, it felt very natural for me to become a ceramic artist making dinnerware because that I love that. It was part of who I was, and this just was sort of the creative outlet that I needed to sort of make the full food, and yeah, so the dishes, what they look like, and so on. I think that has even become more important as Chloe has developed her career and as my career has changed. Um, we see the table as really a big part of the experience that we want to have at the table.
For me, I think that it's the gathering around a table is such an act of like uniting with the people that you love and being able to gather with the people that you love, and not only just to converse and eat food. It really is about creating, as you said, this ambiance. And I think that having the right atmosphere is so important and it's so essential to gathering around a table. I think that, it helps with the way you make people feel, the way you make people comfortable, the way you make your guests feel. Having beautiful dishes, adding candles, having the right linens and placemats and tablecloths. There's just something so beautiful and creative about the whole aspect. And I think truly from the hosting aspect, it goes, there's so many steps that we have to go through to have an end result. And I think that it's something that we talk about so much in our book because it's truly what we love to do and what really, really is important to us. The ritual of eating and the traditions around food are crucial, but also being able to create moments out of those rituals is so important.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think that speaks to the other theme in your book where you talk about romanticizing your life and really like creating a space for that. How did that perspective in terms of bringing romance into dining and eating and preparing foods, how did that play into the structure of your cookbook?
For me, romanticizing my life is something that I feel like I've always done, but even more in the last few years. I think that through so many things that have happened, challenges, hurdles, life, I think we have to romanticize our life. We have to look at all the beauty that is around us constantly. And something that truly can change your life in so many aspects. And when we are really, really prioritizing and what we put out into the world and how we make people feel, that's really what this book is about. We want to make people feel like they can achieve anything and that their dreams of creating beautiful moments are already there. And I think that being able to inspire others to also romanticize their life is something that I've made this whole life around because I think that we never know what can happen in our life. Life is so uncertain, and we are so privileged to be in this world and to be surrounded by so much beauty. And I know that we can, be pessimistic about certain things and life happens and there's, as I said, challenges, but there's we I think there's so much beauty in really being able to create moments out of anything, whether it's like you see something beautiful and you're captivated by it and you're inspired by it, or even creating moments in your home around food. I think that's really something that we try to emulate in the
I
cookbook.
think there's, and I still talk about this, but we talked about it a lot as she was growing up. And I think it's just being extremely aware of what is around you. So, it can be anything, not just at the table, but really, we would, go for a walk and did you see this? And oh my God, it's so beautiful. So it's being, taking in all of what, all of the beauty that we see in every day and kind of how do we translate that into our day to day. And, you can be alone uh, by yourself, having a little supper, and how do you make that a moment for yourself? It can be very simple. It's one thing when you're hosting and you have a lot of people and you're preparing, but even just having that place that in front of you is a beautiful dish and a very lovely meal that you've taken 30 minutes to make, and just having that moment with a bit of music. That these are all very, for us, it's very important. Yeah, around food, but around life, because it's the appreciation of those things that really makes your life very fulfilled. And and I think it's available to everybody. Those moments, so it's
Yeah.
very special.
I fully agree. And it really struck me, even just seeing a section where you had recipes for one, as you said, and like plating for one, just strikes me in contrast to the very North American kind of like eating over the kitchen sink by yourself and having like saltines and crackers.
I've
um,
done that a few times myself. Everybody does. We have those moments.
Yep.
But I was thinking too, there's a lot of European inspiration across your recipes that you present in the cookbook. And it strikes me that, as you said, like it's not just about the recipes themselves, but the broader lifestyle. So I'm curious, given that European recipes tend to be, a little bit more fish heavy or meat heavy in certain cultures, how did you translate the lessons that you learned through food in Europe into plant-based cooking for this book?
For me, it was not only about the actual recipes in the cooking aspect. It was also about the traditions that are very, very European. So, for example, the apéro is a very French tradition. Obviously, they also have it in Italy, which is like aperitivo. Every culture kind of has that where it's like that little snack time before dinner. And it's kind of bringing in those traditions that are found in more European cultures and being able to bring them to our audience here and also inspire our foods that we are trying to recreate. But also, since it is very true that more European culture, especially like French food, is very meat heavy, very buttery, it's not the typical vegan, plant-based idea that you would have. But to me, I think that it's so important to be able to offer these recipes that, are fresh and that create, this kind of European flair, which to me is very Mediterranean in the cookbook. It kind of reminds me of Greece, it reminds me of the south of France and Spain and Italy, and it creates a kind of warmth, Mediterranean warmth that is very, very fresh. And we do have recipes that kind of emulate a little bit more this kind of meaty feel that you would have. We have a mushroom bolognese that's amazing. I don't think we're trying to replicate exactly like regular foods into vegan foods, but really more like these typical traditions that you would get in Europe. And this kind of flair and feel that people have, this kind of joie de vivre that I think we also need to kind of learn from.
I think there's also kind of concretely the spicing, and we've
Mhm.
used as Chloe said, mushrooms or lentils or other things through the book that sort of replicate that more meaty flavor. It really is sort of taking some of those aspects and working them into the recipes with all of the spicing and so on. And yeah, I think we certainly get the flavor of everything. And we have it on the full polenta and all of these other that are more hearty and sort of make the replacement for dishes.
Yeah, certainly. Another thing too that really, at least to me, comes out through the cookbook is taking a more European approach to like thinking about where you're sourcing your food. So do you mind speaking a little bit to those sorts of inspirations into the recipes that you crafted for this?
I think that I really, especially living in New York now, and our fridges are so small, the kitchens are so
Yeah.
small. Well, it is kind of more of this European flair or mindset, if you want, because we kind of do have to go and get our groceries every few days. Obviously, in New York, people order takeout much more than in Europe. But, I kind of like this aspect where you go and do your groceries every 2 days or even every day. You go and you take your 35 minutes and you go to your local market and you really get the groceries that you need for your lunch that day, for your dinner. And that is makes it so much more fresh than, buying groceries for the entire week or for 2 weeks. Also, you're much more inclined to buying like fresh produce. So I really, really love that aspect of being able to buy more locally and seasonally and buying more fresh produce in that way. I think that there's so much to learn about, trying to find where your food comes from, especially nowadays. Climate change is real, environmental issues are real, and we need to make sure that, we're not only thinking about the freshness of our food, like the seasonality of it, but also if it's coming from the other side of the world, also that the footprint that it has is not great. So I think that to me, buying more local and seasonal is of course better. And I know that it is more expensive. It's definitely a privilege to be able to buy those things. But I think that what I love about vegan food and plant-based foods is that also there's so many things that we can eat that you can't and that can stay fresh for a very long time. So if you mix, chickpeas and beans and canned produce, but also with fresh and seasonal, I think that that's the best way to put it. And that's also very European in some way.
I think, we tried to keep our recipes extremely simple, especially if you're starting out and trying to make more plant-based meals. I think it's really important that other ingredients be really accessible, that, you can keep some of those in your pantry at all times. Some people can't go out two or three times a week to get groceries. So I think it's important to be able to substitute things, in some of our bowls. If there's not broccoli and we have cauliflower, well, put cauliflower. I think we have to try to not be so strict on those kind of things. And it tastes delicious and can be easier for people. And as Chloe said, if you want to make fresh feeds and put them in the recipe, perfect. If you don't have fresh feeds, there's sous vide, that is.
Pre-cooked.
Yeah, cooked, sorry, cooked, pre-cooked beets or canned beets, or, it's still very delicious. And so there's an accessibility to the ingredients. I think that's really important. There's not 40 ingredients that have to run out to all the different specialty stores. We really tried to make it extremely easy. It's just,
Yeah, and that was one thing, like looking through the recipes, typically you're looking through a gorgeous cookbook and you're like, but it requires this like hyper specific thing that I absolutely don't have. And so it becomes a plan of acquiring. And I was looking through and it's like, these are all already in my pantry, which is fantastic.
and it's good, because that's exactly
Yeah.
what we wanted. We really wanted it to be easy for people to
And
try to
very
incorporate.
approachable.
Yeah, super approachable, and really to try plant-based eating as much as possible.
Yeah. So, and I'm curious too, you speak to, again, this idea of romanticization of your life. And I think a lot of what you're saying, it kind of is like reframing perspective on the day to day. So for people that are perhaps learning to eat plant-based, trying it out for the first time, or they have been for quite a while and they're feeling kind of blasé about like their daily routines, I'm curious to get your perspective on tips or pieces of advice that you would give for someone to make these experiences feel a little bit more beautiful or romantic for the day-to-day in relation to cooking.
For me, I think that sometimes, I hear a lot of my friends or people that I know that for them, cooking is such a chore, it's a task, but they love food, but for them, it's like, why would I take 45 minutes to an hour every night to make my dinner when I'm already burnt out from my day and I could order something? And I think that to me, I mean, I get it. Like, I completely understand that that can be super easy and also just like, but there's something so rewarding about cooking food and making a recipe. I think even though you're doing it yourself, you're inventing a recipe, creating your own, or you're flipping through a cookbook and you're, making that kind of recipe. I think that there's so much to say about being able to cook your own food and also how much healthier it is and you know exactly what goes into it. And I think that just being able to kind of take that moment, the 35 minutes or however long it will take you to do a recipe, and really focus on that act, I think that is such a beautiful thing because we live in such a fast-paced life. And it's really, really, I think, rare nowadays that we're not on our phones all the time. And we kind of take this moment to exactly like put our phones away and be able to focus, read a recipe, or, you know, kind of look at your pantry, your spice drawer, and kind of like, you know, create something yourself. I think that act of cooking and of taking that specific moment throughout your day to really be able to do that, I think that's in itself just really, really beautiful and really an act of like slow living because that's
Mm.
what it kind of goes back into, being able to make our own food and really create that moment throughout our day. I think that's just so beautiful. And also, you can romanticize your life through doing that if you want.
It really is. I really agree with that. It's that moment of even, that's why most of the recipes are kind of around 30 minutes to me.
Mm.
And there's some that are even less. And it doesn't have to be a big meal. It can be a taksoon or it can be something that, is a quick 20 minutes, but it is that kind of break, I think, from, this was my work day and kids or whatever. And I have this small moment of creating something very beautiful, very delicious for myself or for my family. And that that simple act of taking that moment to create that is it's really it's an act of self-care also to and beauty around what you're doing. So I agree with what Chloe's saying. So it's a pleasure, but yeah, I understand every night is not the same.
But I think it does come down to taking that moment to kind of reframe it as an act of care for yourself. I really love that. And for the people that you're cooking with. It kind of reminds me of like, on the internet there's a lot of talk of like touching grass and
Yeah.
kind of making that disconnect. And I think creating food in the way that you two speak to in this cookbook is really getting in touch, like working with your hands and disconnecting from like this hyper digital. And in doing so, there's benefits not just for your stomach, but mentally as well.
Absolutely. The
Mhm.
other thing is you have a family, getting everyone involved and,
Mm.
working together around the island in the kitchen or around the table. And that, is these are memories that you're creating with your children. And, Chloe and I had a tradition when she was growing up of making pancakes every Saturday.
Mhm.
And that tradition is still in place. We live in different cities, but we're still making pancakes, Saturday morning pancakes. And, Chloe, this was such a special moment for her. And she, remembered that all the time as we grew up. And so it's creating those incredibly wonderful moments with your family, with your kids that last forever.
Yeah, 100%. Well, Chloe, Trudy, thank you so much for joining me. I could chat with you forever about cooking. It's such a pleasure. Do you mind sharing where folks can find you and your cookbook online if they'd like to learn more about your journey?
You can find our cookbook on Barnes and Noble, Amazon, Target. It's pretty much wherever you can find the books. It's called The Artful Way to Plant-Based Cooking. You can find me on social media at Chloe C. LaRue.
And you can find me on Trudy.Crane on Instagram, or my ceramic work is on booksite.com.
Oh, incredible. Thank you both for joining me. It's been such a joy getting to chat with you both.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much. It's a real pleasure.
That was Trudy Crane and Chloé Crane-Leroux. I've linked their cookbook, The Artful Way to Plant-Based Cooking, and their social media handles in the show notes below if you want to follow along and learn more. You can also find all this at our website at anthrodish.com under episodes. Thanks so much for listening to Anthro Podcast. Subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like this show, please rate us on Apple Podcasts to help get the word out. For more Anthro, sign up for my newsletter at sarahduignan.substack.com or find me on TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook at Anthro Podcast. I always love hearing from you and what you're thinking about food. Sound editing, intro music, and production was done by Lucas Wojcicki at lucassound.com. Anthro is produced in partnership with the American Anthropological Association. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week.